This is the Flipping Junkie podcast, episode 26. Welcome to the Flipping Junkie podcast. My name is Danny Johnson, former software developer turned house flipper, flipping hundreds of houses. Each week, we bring you interviews, strategies, stories, and motivation to help you get started flipping houses and on your way to becoming your own boss and achieving financial freedom. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's get to it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Flipping Junkie podcast. Thank you for listening. I know there's a lot of other options out there, other real estate investing podcasts. A lot of them are my friends, so I wouldn't say don't listen to them, but thank you for listening to us as well and making a lot of these great episodes in order. What we're doing right now is we've provided the last, I think it was 7 or 8 podcast episodes. We're covering the foundation with mindset, motivation, all that kind of thing. Now we're moving more into building teams and getting your business set up correctly. And then we're going to get into marketing, analyzing deals, making offers, all that stuff. So it's sort of like a course through podcasts. So every week you're going to get a next step in the process of starting in real estate investing. So I don't know that anybody else has done that. I wanted to set something up so that the podcast wasn't sort of all over the place, where one week you hear about investing in commercial properties, and the next week you're talking about asset protection or something like that. It's just all over the place, and it's kind of hard to progress that way. But anyway, what we are doing now today is we're going to be talking about whether or not you should get a real estate license. Now, this question comes up a lot. People wonder whether it would be best to get a real estate license to become an agent as a real estate investor. And so today I've got my friend on again, Marco Romero. He was actually in episode 23, so just a couple weeks ago. You may have heard the episode with him. Great guy, and he himself is a licensed agent. So we're going to bring him on, and he's going to, well, actually, we have him on today, so right now, and we're going to discuss the pros and cons of becoming a real estate agent. So a little background about Marco. He got started after getting interested, after reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad at an early age, and laying out a success strategy. He began to acquire skills he would need in order to build a career as an investor. He gained valuable people skills by working in sales and the restaurant field. So the experience he gained by working with a wide spectrum of individuals was critical in success in investment properties. So since obtaining his real estate license over 7 years ago, he's worked for several investment companies in San Antonio and now successfully runs his business independently. He spent time in all realms of residential real estate, from standard single-family homes to small multifamily properties. Taking what he's learned in other fields, Marco has brought a philosophy that a transaction's never about the property, but rather always about the people. And that's a very important point Marco makes, and I like that philosophy. So there's really not a right answer to the question of whether someone should get a real estate license or not. It's more about weighing the pros and cons and determining which is best for you and your situation. And an example of that might be, if you strictly target marketing to motivated sellers and rent out the houses that you buy, so you're not really selling them, reselling them, and you're not buying listed properties, you probably won't be as interested in getting your license. But if, on the other hand, you buy most of your houses from the MLS and sell the houses retail after you fix them up, you're likely going to find that having the license has a lot more advantages than disadvantages. So we're going to talk about those pros and cons, and then based on what you typically do or looking to do in your real estate investing business, help you decide whether it would be beneficial to go that direction or not. So let's go ahead and get Marco on the line here and talk to him about all these pros and cons. And thanks again for listening to the Flipping Junkie podcast. And you'll find all the show notes for this episode at flippingjunkie.com/26. flippingjunkie.com/26. All right. Hey, Marco, thanks for being on the show again. I know we just had you a couple weeks ago, so thanks for taking the time to talk with me again.
Hey, Danny, I'm glad to be back. I could tell that you missed me, so I'm glad to be here.
How could you tell? Because I was texting and calling you like incessantly for the past 2 weeks.
I was
No,
like, man, he's talking to me a lot more normal.
no.
He's trying to make me a superstar over here on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, we did such a great episode the last time, and I know you had given a presentation before about pros and cons and everything involved with getting your real estate license, as an investor or when you're getting started as an investor. And typically on the show we'll talk about how people got their start and everything. But since you were on just a couple weeks ago, if people are really interested, they go back and listen to episode 23, which is the one where we went into some of that. So rather than starting about how you got started and everything, let's talk about when you got started. I'm pretty sure you said that you got your license when you got started. So could you talk about your thought process for why you did that?
Definitely. Well, it kind of, at the time, it kind of went in line with the direction that I was wanting to go. And if you remember from last time on the podcast, I mentioned that I had joined Lifestyles, which is an education mentor group here in San Antonio, and I was a member there first. And the reason I was a member there is because I was really wanting to get involved in real estate, start investing. I hadn't done any investing at that point, but I had done a lot of reading, a lot of researching, a lot of seminars, and I was really involved in their group. And they actually pursued me and presented the opportunity of becoming an agent. And basically, as an agent with them, I would find investment deals on MLS, work with their investors looking for properties as my clients, and represent them from the beginning to end until they became the owners of the property. And for me at the time, I was just so new, I thought it was an excellent opportunity for me. It kind of hit a couple key factors for me. Number one, it was going to allow me to be more involved in the group. Number two, I wasn't doing deals. I didn't have lots of money to do deals. So even if I did one deal at that time, I would only learn from that one deal. Whereas if I was an agent working with their investors, I could be leveraging the experiences of each of those transactions. Learn, practice at negotiating, learning how to write the contracts, learning how to deal with pitfalls, how to review an inspection report, how to pick an inspector themselves. And so by helping all these investors get their deals, I was actually treating their deals as my own deals. And it made me become more proficient, helped me learn, and it ultimately helped me become a better investor down the road. But it kind of just at the time really fit with the direction I was going, and I saw it as an opportunity to further myself and to become better for the ultimate goal I was trying to achieve, and that's why I decided to become an agent at that time.
Wow, that's great. And so, yeah, it fits into when people talk about working with another investor to get experience. Because you can read all you want and listen to podcasts and everything and learn a lot, but really until you get into the real world experience and take action, like the real learning begins. And so,
No, that's definitely the truth. There's nothing like the real deal. I mean, there's a lot of books and seminars and people, and you can have theoretical concepts, and you can have the general idea of how items are supposed to go from, step A to step B to step C, all the way to a completed deal. But what you'll find is that real life isn't as organized as that. And sometimes you have to adjust on the fly or deal with a particular problem that you didn't foresee or plan for or even knew could exist. And by being involved in real transactions, it's really going to help you grow and get your creative juices going, and just understand how to deal with an investment deal from the beginning to the end in a more higher level contextual view. And being involved with other investors, whether you're getting paid on it or not, is going to be a valuable experience for you, especially starting out, because that's where learning happens in leaps and bounds rather than in steps. And that's something that I always recommend to people.
Yeah, that's great. And so why did you had mentioned, that helped with getting started, but why was it that you had to be an agent to be able to help out with doing that with that company?
Well, it was just the way that their particular company was set up. they're an education group, so they have a bunch of members, and there's different levels of membership. And for the higher levels of membership, those members had access to real estate agents that would look for particular investment deals for them, and basically say, hey, send them an email and say, hey, there's an investment deal available. Do you want to pursue it? So for those members, it makes their life a little bit easier. It's more for the people that have more money but don't necessarily have the time, or in some cases don't have the full education to know how to do the deal completely. And so by using the agents with that particular company, they're leveraging the agent's time, that agent's experience, and help them go through it that way. So I didn't go into it with that mindset or plan. That's just something that's how they operate. And then they presented it to me, and I was like, wow, that makes sense. I want to get involved in that manner, and that's kind of how it came to be.
Okay, so you were doing the hunting for the deals for the other members.
Right. I would hunt for the deals, and then as the agent, I would represent them from, negotiation to contract to closing.
Great. So if we look at this from the perspective of somebody that's either new or already doing some real estate investing, I'm not sure that it would be too much different between the two situations, but would you be able to discuss the pros of getting your real estate agent's license?
Well, I am a real estate agent, obviously, since we've been discussing it, and I am a real estate investor, and there are a lot of pros involved in becoming a real estate agent. Number one, which was a big component for me, especially starting out, was access to MLS. I felt like that was like the holy grail at the time. Obviously I was newer. I didn't really know all the different ways you can get properties, but I did know that MLS, that's the database where people are all trying to sell their houses. Having access to that is very powerful. You always have leads to go after. Now, there might be a lot of competition in certain areas, but if you are proficient and going through the deals and building a relationship with the other agents, you can find deals on MLS. But the other component to MLS is you can run your own comps, which that's valuable in itself. You don't have to rely on other people to give you the information on what is this property worth, what is this property, what could it rent for, what's going on in the area, how quickly your property is moving, how many other properties are for sale in this particular neighborhood. All those are critical pieces of information which helps you decide and make intelligent decisions on how to pursue a property, that if you don't have access to MLS, you're relying on others to get it to you. So the fact that you as an agent have access to MLS really can help you quickly determine different items and help you pursue different properties in one way or another based on that information. So access to information is huge. Another component as a pro in my mind is, as a real estate agent, you have to go through a rigorous amount of schooling. They make you take all these different classes to prove that you have the level of education that the state is mandating. And by taking all those classes, in some cases, yes, they might be boring. Let's say you're going over law, but there's a lot of critical information that a lot of people wouldn't get any other way. And the fact that as a real estate agent, you're almost forced to learn these things really ultimately can help you become a more rounded and knowledgeable real estate professional, number one, but also a more rounded and knowledgeable real estate investor. I have a very intricate knowledge of how to write contracts, the different components in the different sections within the contract, how to use them to my advantage, whether I'm on the buyer side or seller side, that either I wouldn't have gotten by just going the path of solely being a real estate investor, or would have taken me a lot longer. And it's just because real estate agents are writing contracts all the time. And those classes are there for you to learn all the different components, whether it's investment real estate or not. And by learning the components of, hey, just, normal buyer representation and how buyers purchase properties that from a retail standpoint, that is excellent knowledge to have for you as an investor when you're trying to sell the property at retail price, a flip as an example.
Yeah, that's a good point because that's one that I didn't even think of really when I was thinking of the pros myself of becoming, getting your license. It is of education because really as a real estate investor, sellers, even if you're especially actually if you're buying houses directly from sellers, from motivated sellers, they're sort of relying on you to have the ability to know what you're doing. And you really should know what you're doing for their sake and for your sake. And I think there are a lot of investors out there with a minimal knowledge of how things actually work. And it's not to say that can't be gained another way, but that really is a big pro that you brought up that I didn't really think of at first. So, yeah, I like that.
Definitely, yeah. It's very common as a real estate investor that you get in one area, you focus on that, and you get proficient in that area. And as you by becoming a real estate agent, it really gives you a broader view of the whole world of real estate and how real estate as a whole, as an industry, functions in different components. And having that knowledge is really impactful for you and your business, especially as you're growing as a real estate investor and as you learn different components and how you branch out into other investment strategies. All that's really important.
Great. Okay, so we got access to MLS to find deals and run comps, and then the education aspect of it so that you'll learn more of the ins and outs of real estate. Any other pros to getting your real estate license?
Something I've noticed is when I am doing deals, particularly on MLS, if I mention that I'm a real estate agent and I'm dealing with other real estate agents or real estate brokers, I'm usually given sometimes a little bit more information. There's something about it when I'm talking to a real estate agent and they know they are also dealing with a real estate agent. They're not as standoffish or combative. I've tried the approach both ways, and I found that people are more open. So they like, oh, this other person is also a real estate agent, another real estate professional. They understand the game and the situation, and so they're a little bit more open. They're more willing to help. They're more willing to give information or to guide a transaction in a certain way. Or, they kind of view it as, hey, we're both real estate agents and we're trying to make this transaction work, so they're a little bit more helpful. That's just kind of a side bonus that I've noticed when doing business, especially with real estate brokers. I don't know what it is about real estate brokers, but most of them, not all of them, but most of them see themselves on like a pedestal. So they think they're like better than real estate investors or something. But if you say you're a real estate agent, they're like, oh, okay, this guy's, gone through some schooling. He knows how the deal works, and they're a little bit more helpful.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's probably where that comes from. It's not that they're maybe, they do it on purpose, but, there's so many real estate investors out there, and there's a big handful that really don't know what they're doing. And so they end up calling and finding out and wasting people's time and wasting brokers' time. So I think maybe that, just to look at it from their perspective is probably because of that. I mean, would you agree to that?
Oh, definitely. And you actually touch on another component. When I was first starting out, that was pretty much all I was doing was transactions for other real estate investors, so working as a real estate agent. And by doing that, I was constantly in contact with other real estate agents and working on transactions with other real estate agents. And by doing that, I was dealing with numerous different real estate professionals, and it helped me learn how to be better as a professional myself. Meaning, how can I make sure that this contract is filled out completely, not just all the different components of the price and closing date, but making sure that the agents, the other agents' information is completely filled out. How to quickly respond, or how to make sure that I know that this information is going to be requested. Let's say inspection date is the next step. of the process, knowing that I need to schedule it through CSS. I need to make sure I have a showing time frame, make sure I block off the appropriate amount of time, letting that other agent know that we're going to have 1 to 2 days to review it, and that we'll have a response at this time, and just basically being a better professional, regardless of the real estate component, being better with communication, time management, follow-up, communication in general. By dealing with all these other real estate investors as a real estate, or excuse me, by dealing with all these other real estate agents as an agent myself, I learned to become more proficient in that realm, which translated into my investment business to becoming more proficient, more professional, and more on top of my business in general.
Yeah, and that's very important. What about in with regards to working with other agents as well? I mean, what about sweetening deals for listing agents if you're looking for deals? So if you're looking at maybe contacting an REO agent about a bank-owned property as an investor, but also as an agent, aren't there ways to kind of sweeten the deals for that listing agent if you were to make an offer?
I've done plenty of times where I don't collect my buyer's agent commission. That's always been really big.
And so they end up getting that, right? If you don't, like you just sort of, tell them that, they can have your commission.
Basically. So the way it works
I guess it's the net, right?
Right. So the listing agent typically writes an agreement with the seller, whether it's a bank or not, and they usually are making about 6%. And then when another agent is brought into the transaction, that listing agent is the one that decides what the split is in combination with what they've agreed upon with the seller. Typically, that split is 3% for the listing agent and 3% for the buyer's agent. So it's a 50-50 split. So I in a lot of cases, will go to an agent and say, hey, I won't act as a real estate agent in this transaction. I'm going to work as a real estate investor. I'm going to forfeit my buyer's agent commission, and that way the listing agent can get paid the full 6%. But they know that they're dealing with the real estate agent, so they know that this is a serious transaction. The person they're dealing with is professional, knows what they're doing, those type of things. And you can do that as a standard real estate investor too. But that's a technique that you can use when dealing with a listing agent to incentivize them to help you in this transaction, because they're basically getting paid double.
Right. And there's probably other ways to help incentivize it as well that's not related to money and more in time, right? Because agents are busy, and there's things that have to be done with those properties, with scheduling and lock boxes and things like that, and probably a lot of times they've got people that are doing that for them. But do you feel like it would be a benefit to tell them that you would handle some of those things for them so that they don't have to?
Oh, of course, definitely. I mean, you don't have to have your license to do that if you communicate with the agent in that regard. But there's an understanding there, and of course, if you can just be that professional and be able to help them in that regards, of course, that in itself is a big motivating factor for them to want to work with you.
Yeah, great. So we talked about listed properties, and what about, are there any pros to having your license if you're an investor that mostly buys off-market deals? So they're doing the We Buy Houses type marketing and getting calls from sellers directly and buying without agents. Are there any pros to having your license at that point?
When you're dealing with motivated sellers?
Right.
I think a big pro for me is a referral. There'll be plenty of motivated sellers that you're in communication with that you just can't see eye to eye on price. Maybe you need to buy it at 40 and they're just stuck on the 55 number. Well, you can say, hey, either number one, you can list the property for them and make a commission there. But I like even better than that is to just refer that seller to another real estate agent and say, hey, real estate agent, here's a seller. They're ready to sell their house and they want to sell at this price. Can you list the house for them? And whatever you make, give me 25%. And I don't have to do any of the work. I gave them the lead, and then I'll just get a check, 2 months down the road for no work. Um, I have plenty of referral basis with other real estate agents because I'm a real estate agent. They'll pay me a percentage of their commission.
Yeah, that's great. And that's where I was waiting for that, because it was like, well, couldn't you do that if you weren't an agent? But that's the thing, right? It's the referral, being paid for referral, as you know, and
Yeah, technically, a real estate agent is not supposed to pay anyone from a commission derived from a real estate sale. But if it's paid to another real estate agent as a commission, that's a way to still accomplish that and not break any rules.
right. Okay, cool. All right. Did you have any other pros for
I guess the other pro is depends on um, who who you broker under, which is really critical for a lot of real estate agents, and some agents don't give it as much thought as they should. Um, Picking the brokerage that you want to be with is really powerful and important.
Yeah, can you
And
explain how that works first? Because I think there's probably a lot of people that don't understand the whole brokering and hanging your license.
sure, so in the state of Texas, only real estate brokers, which are like a step above real estate agents, people that have been in the business for a little while, have done a little bit of extra education, and have taken a test to get the brokerage license. Only real estate brokers can practice real estate um, in Texas. However, they can sponsor real estate agents to practice real estate on behalf of themselves. So, real estate agents cannot practice real estate unless they are sponsored by a real estate broker. And so, there are very big name brokerages out there, and brokerages are just the culmination of people that brokers have put together. Big ones are like Century 21 and Keller Williams and things of that degree. Then there might be more of a mom and pop person that's like, hey, I got my brokerage license, and it's just me and two guys in the office kind of thing. You want to put yourself in a position, depending on your experience level and knowledge level, where you can leverage all the benefits of your brokerage, which is usually number one, access to education and training. A lot of brokerages will have their own classes and their own updates because real estate's always changing, the forms are always changing, the rules are always changing, especially for agents. And then also access to the people in the office. Some brokers are never around. You don't want to be with those. You want to be with brokers that are always involved, always helping, always giving you ideas, because the truth is most brokers have been around for quite a number of years. That's why they're a broker, and in some cases 20, 30 plus years. And they might have a unique perspective on your particular problem or solution that you might not have ever thought of because you haven't encountered that situation before. And they can really help you in your process, whether it's an investment deal or just a normal real estate transaction. So taking the time to really identify what are the items that are important to you as far as like knowledge, education, access to the broker and the other agents in the office. And then there's also fees, of course, and deciding what are those items that are most important to you and how can they further your investment goals is very important, because there are some brokerages that have no clue about real estate investing, so they don't know how to write the contracts in your favor. They might not understand creativity, like creative financing, and because of that lack of knowledge will shun it. Well, you want to be with people that understand it completely, will further it, will give you ideas, and hey, maybe they service a lot of investor clients themselves and can give you leads those type of things. You want to put yourself in a spot to succeed when you're making this big choice, because the broker and the brokerage will affect your success in ways that you may or may not know.
Great. And I wanted to ask a little bit more about that. So if you mentioned finding one that is more aware of how real estate investors work, and so that they don't shun it for lack of knowledge of how it works. And, how would you find those people is the first thing. And then the other thing was about the fees, because you briefly mentioned that there's fees. And I was wondering how the fee structure usually works, and, how agents paid the brokers and how all of that works. So if you could cover maybe those two topics.
Okay. I'll cover the fees first. As far as the fees, every broker is different, and it's basically an agreement between, as a real estate agent, your agreement is between you and the broker. So in all reality, you can negotiate what the costs and fees are to you. Now, most brokers don't operate in that manner. Most brokers have a standard in which all their agents perform, and you either accept it or you don't. But some common fees are desk fee. Some common fees might be a yearly fee, just for being a part of the brokerage, just for being there. There might be like a supply type fee. There might be fees for, hey, this broker generates leads for the office, and if you want access to those leads, you need to pay a certain amount, whether it's like a one-time or a monthly kind of thing. But the biggest one that usually takes the most away from you as the agent is what is their percentage or amount that they get from each transaction. Really common one is like if the buyer's agent, which I referenced earlier, would get paid 3%. So you're doing a deal and you get on a $100,000 house, you get paid $3,000. In a lot of cases, a broker might take $1,000 from that, and you keep the $2,000, and they get 1%. There are some brokers out there where they'll take a flat fee, maybe $500 or $250 on any transaction, whether it's you get paid $12,000 or you get paid $2,000. So those are some things to look at. There are also at the level higher than the broker. There are fees with the here in San Antonio, we have SABOR, the Board of Realtors. There are fees with the Board of Realtors and having fees to be able to access MLS. Usually those are quarterly, and those are usually just a couple $100s or so. And then there's usually a big yearly fee with the Texas Real Estate or Texas Board of Realtors and the National Board of Realtors, and those fees are, I think, right around $200 or so every year. But if you're doing, there's a lot of fees, but if you're doing consistent business, it's really a small percentage of what you can make. And then what was the first part of your question? I forget.
Yeah, the first one was finding the brokers that you would want to work with as an investor.
Number one, ask investors that you know. That's a great starting point. There's most investors, or any of the good ones, they all have agent contacts. They all have either specific real estate agents that they work with or specific real estate brokers that they work with. And I would just use some tracking to find that. If you have a really good investor that only works with an agent and not a broker, we'll contact the agent and say, who's your broker? And then find out that information that way. Another common way is property management. Brokers that focus on property management are brokers that, for the majority of their business, they're dealing with real estate investors and their investment properties. Now, that's another way to get with people, with brokers that understand the investment business. Now, that's kind of it depends on the broker in that scenario. If they primarily focus on property management, they might not be as knowledgeable as far as the acquisition of investment properties, but at least they're still in the realm of real estate investing. It's another good starting point. And then I've mentioned this in your last podcast. You said it was podcast 23. Everyone needs to listen to that one.
FlippingJunkie.com/23, right?
Yeah, plug for you. the, just going to the local real estate clubs. I mean, people always ask a lot of questions of like, how do you get this, or how do you find a good contractor, or where do you go to get an agent, or where can I find this or that and the other. And the answer is almost always use the power of the network. So go to a place where there's a network. So go to your investment real estate investor associations. There's usually one every single month in all the major markets. And here in San Antonio, I think we have like 4 or 5 major ones every single month. Go to those, talk to people, and just use the power of people that know people that know people, and you'll be able to find good starting points for all the team members that you need in place.
And a great way to do that sometimes, because it can seem overwhelming because you can get some names and then you're sort of left with wondering, well, which of these people should I contact? Which one? And I would say keep doing it until you start to get repeat names, and those are the ones to focus on.
Yeah. Or, focusing on the investors that are, knowledgeable and experienced, that, might have 100 properties in their portfolio. Whoever they recommend are usually going to be quality people.
Right. All right. I think we've covered pretty much all that I could think of, unless you have some more about the pros of getting the license.
As far as the pros, we've covered it.
All right. So let's get into the problems with having it, or cons. Maybe not necessarily problems, but more negative than positive.
Okay. Well, first off, it does make it I am a real estate agent and I'm a real estate investor. So as a real estate agent, I am in the state of Texas, I am considered a real estate professional. I have gone through schooling, I have taken tests, and I am knowledgeable when it comes to real estate. So I am held to a different standard than just any old person, that's might be buying or selling a house. And in the state of Texas eyes, that puts more liability on me to operate in the right manner. So, for instance, one of the problems that you can face if a person, and by the way, in Texas particularly, the real estate commissioner actually came down to one of those local events that I mentioned. What we have here is Alamoria, and he came in actually in January, and he talked about a lot of different components. And an example would be, it can kind of hurt your investment negotiation in some regards, because you have to disclose a lot of different components. Every person I come in contact with, I need to let them know that I'm a real estate agent and have them sign on a form stating that. If there is a person I'm trying to pursue a seller to buy their house, as a real estate agent, I need to disclose to them the value of their property, which can hurt in negotiation at times. Another thing, and they're starting to crack down on this a little bit more and more, as far as agents that are operating ethically. But if a person comes to me, like I didn't pursue them independently of my pursuing them, if they came to me individually, and they say, I want to sell my house, I have to first think of them as a real estate agent and try and get them the most that they can get for that house before I can pursue it personally. So meaning, if they want to sell their house for, let's say, well, maybe they don't know, but it's my fiduciary responsibility to try and get them the most money that they can for that particular house, whether that's through listing the property myself or referring them to another real estate agent. Now, it's okay if they go with another real estate agent to list their house and then I go and pursue the house. But I can't, if they came to me first, my obligation is to service them first before serving myself. So I can't try and buy their property right out the bat. I have to get them representation with an agent and then pursue their property, if
Wow.
that makes sense.
So if you do marketing for buying
No,
houses and they contact you, or is this outside of
no,
that?
no, outside of marketing. If they came out
Okay.
to you independently, if they pursued you first, that makes sense.
Okay. So if you just put up well, let's say you sent out postcards and somebody calls you. At that point, you could try to buy
No,
it.
not in postcards because you pursued them first.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say that sounded pretty terrible.
Yeah,
You know, it's a
he just the commissioner came down on January, and there was a lot of discussion on different components of it, and one of the areas that he was focusing on and trying to um, he's trying to get rid of all like bad dealing in Texas. And so he was originally focusing on property management and trying to get everyone that does property management to have a license so that it can operate right. Well, obviously he came to an investment group, so there was a lot of talking about like wholesaling and investing and things like that. And he said, you know, as an agent, the concern is always for your client's interest before yours. And so if this person came to you independently and said, hey, I want to sell your house, you have to think of the best interest for that person before you think of your own best interest.
I'm just wondering how somebody could come to you outside of marketing unless it's like a referral or something.
Yeah, like you could just, be talking to the neighbors of a house
Oh, I
that
see.
you
Okay.
just bought, and you're like, hey, I'm an investor or whatever, and they say, oh, well, I want to sell my house. You weren't trying to buy their house initially, and they, came after you. That might be an example of it, or
I guess
uh,
you could wear a T-shirt that says "I buy houses," and so no matter what, it's always because of your marketing, right?
right. And he's just now kind of being more specific on it, and I'm sure there's a lot of gray areas and things like that. But that's just an example of it. Basically, as an agent, you have to be more mindful, and there's a lot more steps that you have to adhere to, a lot more disclosure and things like that, which can slow things down for you, can make it a little bit harder for you. If a person knows their house is worth 70 and I'm trying to buy it at 35, it's not as easy to negotiate.
Right. Yeah, and one thing that we used to sell a lot of our houses, the retail sell houses that we would sell after fixing them up. We would do FSBO. We'd sell them for sale by owner, stick a sign out in the front yard, and then put an ad in the newspaper. And it's so very time consuming to take calls and have showings and deal with all of that and all the paperwork. And got smart and decided just to start listing those with an agent and letting them take care of selling the houses.
Hmm.
If you are your own agent, though, then you're sort of doing all those things all over again. Is that how you look at that, or is there another way to look at that?
You mean on doing the listings yourself? Is
Right.
that
So
what?
when you're selling your own properties.
Yeah, I definitely list my own. I up till recently, I listed all my own properties, whether I was renting them or selling them, and that was in an effort to save on costs because the 3% I would earn from my commission, hey, that goes to my bottom line, and it makes the deal that much better. But honestly, as of recently, even though I am a real estate agent, I basically don't act as an agent like almost ever. I refer everything out if it's a listing scenario, or like if I'm trying to buy it as an investor and they're just too high, I refer it out like I mentioned earlier. Or let's say I have a flip, I'll just have another agent do it for me. Or if it's a rental, I'll have another agent do it for me because right now I'm trying to focus on the time component. Time is becoming more and more valuable. So instead of putting my time to save money, I'd rather pay somebody to do these items for me, just like I would pay a contractor to rehab it rather than do it myself in an effort to be more proficient in my time, and I can direct my time to the more profitable items, which is getting the next property.
Right. Right. So that's sort of the con to the pro. The pro is listing your own deals and saving the commission if over having another agent do it. But then you're sort of the one having to deal with the calls and the showings and all that kind of stuff, the back and forth. That's so time consuming.
Right. Another big con is the fees I was mentioning earlier. You know, you have to pay out to your broker every single transaction, and you know sometimes it's a big chunk, sometimes a small chunk, and you know when you count it all up at the end of the year, you're like, man, all this money going out. You know, the fees to have MLS, you know, adds up over the course of years and things like that. So the fees are there, and they're just another cost to do business. But that's something to juxtapose when you're deciding to become an agent. You know, if you're already a real estate investor, is it worth it to become an agent and you know do all these other things and pay these other costs, or what's that cost compared to just having an agent on your team? That's something to consider.
Right, which could get into the whole, you know, that sort of boils back down to the whole argument of whether you have more money than time or more time than money, and which way to go with it.
Right.
All right, so I think we've covered a lot of the pros and cons, pretty much all that I could really think of, and you know, you threw a lot out there that I hadn't even thought of, which was awesome. But then there's other ways, so it's not always just that cut and dry too. With, you know, if you want a pro of having an agent or being an agent, sometimes you can get that benefit without becoming one. And what I'm getting at is sort of, isn't there, you know, a way to get access to the MLS if you're not an agent through working with an agent, maybe as an associate or something? Or...
Yeah. If you just talk to an agent, most of them are pretty lax and they're like, cool, you know, here's a login and just use mine when you're not. Now they're not supposed to do that, but lots of agents do that. And if you're a real estate investor, I totally would take advantage of that. If it doesn't cost you any money, you have an agent that's more than willing to do it, utilize it. Another way that an agent can do it is they can give you your own login as a kind of an assistant to that agent. There is a cost to that. It's pretty minimal. I think here in for San Antonio, it's like $24 every quarter. So that's like basically nothing. To set up a separate login, you can have your own searches and stuff. You do have to have the broker's approval on that, and the broker has to set it up. But that's another way you can get access to MLS. And then last item is an agent can actually set up on the MLS to where particular searches are, the results from those searches are emailed to you, and you can have your own. It's like a separate login that's not MLS itself, but it pulls data from MLS, and it gives you the ability to look at the photos just like an agent can, and you know, go through them. You can get the pertinent information like bed, bath, square footage, those type of things. That's just like a feature of MLS for real estate agents to service their clients. It's like it's primarily for searches. So if you identify particular searches that you want to have in place, sit down with an agent, have them set it up, and they'll email you every time a new property comes up that meets the parameters of your search. So that's another way. Yes.
Yeah, that's great to know, because if you ask an agent, hey, can you pull up all these for me all the time? And it's like, no, I don't have time for that. But knowing that a lot of times in most systems, they have the ability to set up those automations where they put the criteria, and then every time something like that matches the criteria, it'll be automatically emailed to you. It's not a whole lot of work for them.
Right. Definitely.
Right. So great. You know, I think this was an awesome episode, and I can't think of any other questions I have about whether to get a real estate license or not. Back to the whole thing about, you know, it's really up to what you want to do, what you plan on doing, and whether the weighing those pros and cons that we discussed, you know, which ones mean more to you than the others. And I think sometimes maybe even people will look at that as getting a license as just a prolonging or a delaying of getting out of their comfort zone and starting to do things. Yeah. And so I wouldn't use it if it's, you know, if you're honest with yourself and you're not kidding yourself that that's what you're doing. just be careful for that.
Yeah, I have people that come up to me and ask me all the time about it because a lot of people know that I'm an agent and a real estate investor. And a lot of people ask me, should I or shouldn't I? The truth is, there really isn't a yes or no. The way that you should determine whether or not you should get your real estate license is by truly doing a reflection on your current position and where your goals are and where you're trying to go. So, for instance, if you're newer starting out and you're trying to get into it, it might be beneficial for you to get your license because you can learn and be a part of it, and you can actually get paid on other people's transactions. And hey, if you need an extra boost of income, maybe you can help your neighbor buy their next house. And that has nothing to do with real estate investing. You can make a little extra pocket change right there. And if you're an investor that's a little bit more experienced down the road, I would really reflect on what you want to do, because you do have to consider, hey, your time is becoming more and more valuable as you're getting better and better at investing and as you're bringing more and more money in. So is it worth the time and effort to go through the schooling, take the tests, and then to keep your license, you do have to continuously take more classes, which is additional time and money, or could you build your business around leveraging other people's time, other agents' time? That's something to consider. And where do you fall on that spectrum? Really will help you determine how to make that decision and to decide whether or not to get your license.
All right, great. And Marco, we're going to go ahead and end it here. Is there a way for people listening out there, if they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to find you and talk to you?
Well, last time I mentioned follow me on Facebook, and I say go ahead and do that again. You can look me up, Marco A. Romero, and my profile picture is like a piece of art that's orange and white. I had a lot of people contact me last time, so
oh, good, they were finding it then. Good.
Yeah, don't be afraid to contact me. I'm always glad to help and answer questions, or just have intellectual conversation, or just joke around. That's always fun too. So always glad.
Great. And I'll try to do that search and then provide a link if possible on the show notes page, which would be at flippingjunkie.com/26. So if you're having trouble finding him, be sure to check out flippingjunkie.com/26 for the show notes page, and I'll have a link there to Marco's Facebook.
Yep. And I think this is my new favorite podcast of yours. 23 was good, but this one was real good.
Yeah, that's good. And hey, and for people listening, this is coming out. We're releasing them now on Mondays, but Marco was gracious enough, being that I had a pretty crazy schedule, to do this on a Sunday afternoon. So extra thanks to him for taking the time on especially on Sunday to knock this out.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marco.
My thoughts are clear on Sunday, so we planned it appropriately.
Yeah, it did actually work out really well. All right, well, have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Danny, and take care, everyone.
All right, another great episode. Thanks for listening. I'm not sure about you guys, but I don't think I'm going to be working at getting my license. Seems like way too many cons for me. I don't have a license. I haven't had one. And, me, for anything, it's more of time these days. So, having an agent do those things with listing properties, taking calls, handling showings, and all the back and forth of getting properties closed when we sell them, I'd rather do that. And we have an awesome agent that does that for us. But so hope you got some great info out of it. And, if you're looking at it for a way to find deals using the MLS, good for you. If you decide that, well, I don't really think I want to get my license, I'm going to just market to motivated sellers, buy directly from sellers. That's what we mainly do. And most of our leads come from our website. And we provide websites for other real estate investors as well. So if you didn't know, you can get a real estate investor website from us. With all the knowledge I've learned over the last 10 years of using a website to get leads online for motivated sellers, you can check out leadprospect.com. leadpropeller.com. Leadpropeller.com is where we have our websites. You can check them out. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you again next week for the next episode. Have a good one.